Record sales of new cars in Australia as electric vehicle purchases soar. The value of smartphone transactions jumps 50 times over 5 years, and Treasurer Jim Chalmers hints at more action over the PwC scandal. It's Tuesday, the 6th of June, 2023. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, after the show, you've got an interview coming up with Dr. Kim Horton, who is the Chief Economist at the Regional Australia Institute.
Yep, it's a great interview all about why people are moving from cities to the regions and from the regions back to the city. It really shows how mobile Australians are becoming. And if you look at some of the great economies in the world, the US being the obvious example, people shift around countries very easily. And now Australia, we don't do that. Most people are either along the eastern seaboard or a little bit of the western seaboard, but we are actually becoming a lot more mobile. It's a really fascinating chat.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's coming up a little bit later on. The main story this morning, though, Sean, new car sales hit a record high last month, with sales of EVs surging, making the Tesla Model Y the third highest selling vehicle in the country.
Sales across the nation jumped 12% in May to 105,694 units. That is a record. In fact, it's 2.7% higher than the previous record month back in May 2017. While the tradies' friend, the mighty Ute, remains the highest selling car, or car type at least, the growth in electric vehicle sales is quite remarkable. Battery-powered vehicles represented 7.7% of sales in May. If you throw hybrids in there, it's about 15.6% of sales. And Tesla is well and truly leading the way as the biggest selling EV manufacturer. The Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries yesterday said that for the first 5 months of calendar 2023, new vehicle sales were up 4.3% to, close enough to 457,000 units.
That's a lot, Sean. What's the main reason? Is it just the loosening of supply chains?
Primarily, that's the case. Global production levels have been ramping up as the semiconductor shortage eases and backorder books diminish. Now, a big part of the reason for the surge last month is many vehicles were actually ordered last year, but they're only delivered in May. The Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries Chief Executive Tony Webber said the results encouraging, though, given the logistical challenges over the past 12 months, though he did warn that supply chain challenges aren't over yet. What's really promising is that there's a jump in all buyer market segments: private, business, government and rental. In terms of the big sellers, Michael, the Toyota Hilux and Ford Ranger were 1 and 2 as per usual, though last month, or in April at least, Ford Ranger beat Toyota Hilux. They flipped around this time round. Tesla Model Y came in at number 3, selling 3,178 units. The Toyota RAV4 came in at 4, and then the MG ZS.
I know you love speculating on things, Sean. What would it take for EVs to kind of move further up? Because I know there'd be a bit of a margin between kind of 2 and 3 there. Is it kind of mandated purchases from government fleets, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I wonder that. That would certainly help hugely. I think a lot of buyer resistance remains around the fact that you've got to charge them. And so if you had a much easier way, a quicker way of charging, and much easier sort of service stations were offering it, and you could do it in 2 or 3 minutes or 4 or 5 minutes, that's sort of the holy grail. And so when you talk to EV manufacturers, they say if we could get some service stations to charge a car in 3 or 4 minutes, the equivalent of petrol or diesel, then everyone would be buying it. And I think that's probably the holy grail. Of course, if you mandate, like the US has, you're going to end up with a lot more vehicles on the road.
Yeah, all right. Local markets, how did they perform yesterday?
S&P ASX 200 closed up 1%, pretty strong day, finishing at 7,216 points. Consumer discretionary stocks did best, followed by the materials companies and healthcare companies. Worst were the tech stocks. Iron ore prices jumped yesterday, helping the big miners. BHP closed up 1.7%. Fortescue Metals spiked 3.6%, and Rio was 1.3% higher. Wesfarmers had a good day, rising 2%. While the big banks were led by ANZ, which rose more than 1.5%. The laggards included the gold miners Newcrest and Northern Star, and tech leaders WiseTech Global and Xero. And just a quick mention in corporate news, my Chief Executive John King will step down in the second half of next year to return to the US after more than 6 years in the top job. he really has led a major turnaround of the department store chain. It is doing much, much better than it was before he arrived, so good on him.
It's not a bad legacy to leave, is it? To actually come in and turn something around that really looked like it was kind of heading out.
It looked like a basket case. Yeah, it really did.
I was trying to dress that up a bit, but really it was not looking good for Maya, was it?
No, at one point there, a few years back, it was looking awful.
International markets, there's a bit going on, Sean.
Sure is, Michael. Saudi Arabia will reduce how much oil it sends to the global economy, triggering a jump in the price of Brent crude. Saudi will cut production by 1 million barrels a day from next month. The rest of the OPEC Plus producers agreed to extend earlier production cuts through to the end of 2024. Not surprisingly, oil prices jumped sharply. Bad news at the petrol bowser. Just want to I try and get my head around 1 million barrels of oil a day. That's reducing it by that much.
Yeah.
It's a huge sum. And they have to transport that around the world too. It's quite remarkable. I always get blown away by that. Anyway, Michael mentioned higher iron ore prices earlier on. That's because there are media reports that Beijing is working on boosting the property sector in China, which is a very significant part of the overall economy. And it's actually one of the real problems in China. It's a key hurdle to stronger growth. If China does well, then that will obviously help Australian iron ore exporters. That's why the share prices of Fortescue, Rio and BHP went up yesterday. Finally, in international markets, the Aussie dollar is back below 66 US cents.
All right, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, the value of transactions using cards on smartphones has risen from $746 million in 2018 to more than $93 billion, with a B, billion, in 2022. This is according to Australian Bankers Association research.
And the number of cards registered to mobile wallets has gone from just over 2 million to 15.3 million. The research will be published by the Australian Banking Association tomorrow, according to a report in the Financial Review. The numbers are staggering. As you say, $93 billion in 2022. Cash now represents just 6% of the point of sale transactions in Australia. It's predicted to go down to 2% by 2025. And it is very much this mobile wallet that's taken over.
Can you give my barber a call, Sean? Because they are stubbornly cash only. And it is the only shop I go into at any point ever where I'm required to use cash. Otherwise, I never pick up my wallet, never use my card or anything except for when I have to go to the ATM to get cash out now to get my hair cut. And I had that yesterday, so this is very, very fresh for me right now.
Well, firstly, I'm impressed that you go to a barber to get your hair cut. That's where we'll start.
What were you expecting?
A hairdresser for you, Michael. I've seen you. You've got a very good barber. Yes, but I agree. There are so many places that just don't take cash anymore. And this has actually become a really big issue, particularly among the large banks. Basically, Matt Comyn, the Commonwealth Bank boss, has come out and said the figures demonstrate that Apple has enormous market power, both by its sheer size and scale, market capitalisation, biggest company in the world, and customer relationships. Commonwealth Bank wants its banking app to be able to use iPhones to make tap-and-go payments on much better terms than Apple currently offers. Now, the ACCC is investigating if Apple's practice of restricting third-party access to what they call the near-field communication technology and the terms it imposes for use of Apple Pay by third parties raises concerns under competition law. Apple reckons that banks and other companies can access the near-field communication functionality from their own apps via Apple's programming interfaces, but Matt Comyn and others believe Apple makes it too restrictive. It's going to be kind of a big issue going forward. I mean, it's been around for a while, so it's not new, but just when you see the value of transactions, as you say, $93 billion going through the phone, it's obviously a very, very big challenge for the banks.
So long story short, there's no reason why my barber should not be using kind of tap and go.
And in fact, Westpac introduced this functionality about 2 weeks ago where I don't think the other majors have done it, but you can actually use a mobile phone as your payments terminal.
Oh, really?
So If you are a small business and Westpac is your bank, you can download an app. And so when Michael Thompson comes in for a haircut, you just use your own mobile phone, and that's actually your payments terminal. It's quite spectacular that, you don't even need one of those little squares or anything like that now. It's pretty cool.
God, it can't get much easier than that, can it?
No, I don't think so. Oh, we digress.
We do. But yes, my hair looks very good today. Thank you. All right, moving on, Sean. Ahead of today's decision by the Reserve Bank Board on interest rates, ratings agency S&P Global has warned that mortgage arrears in Australia are climbing and financial stress is escalating.
And the stress is appearing among both prime mortgages and non-conforming securities. So basically that means across the spectrum of home loans. S&P blamed rising interest rates and cost of living pressures and said things will get worse later in the year. Now, the ratings agency also named some of the hardest hit areas. The worst hotspot for arrears, that's people who haven't been able to keep up with home loan repayments, is in the Blue Mountains in New South Wales in the suburb of Katoomba, where 5.6% of loans is in arrears. Other suburbs heavily in arrears in New South Wales, including Bodyrig, Dolls Point, and the Southern Highland suburb of Alpine. Forest Feel in Western Australia also makes the list, as does Avoca Dell in South Australia, Barkly in Queensland, and Broadmeadows in West Melbourne in Victoria.
Sean, the full judgment of Ben Roberts-Smith's defamation case has been released 4 days after the result was delivered in court.
Yes, Justice Anthony Pasenko had only provided a summary judgment last week due to a last-minute request from the Commonwealth to inspect the full judgment before its public release. Now, the full judgment is 736 pages long. In it, Justice Pasenko writes that Ben Roberts-Smith and various witnesses he called were not honest or reliable. Last week, Justice Pasenko found that 9 newspapers, The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald and the Canberra Times, had proven that Roberts-Smith unlawfully killed 4 unarmed Afghan prisoners.
Sean, the Australian Financial Review held its annual ESG summit yesterday. There were plenty of business leaders in attendance, and one of the more interesting discussions came from ASIC chairman Joe Longo, who said the regulator has a bunch of concerns that keep cropping up in greenwashing claims.
Yeah, so greenwashing is essentially an unsubstantiated claim aimed to deceive investors or customers into believing a company or its products are environmentally friendly. Spin, shall we say, spin. Now, Longo isn't happy with companies that make net zero statements and targets without a reasonable basis that they're factually correct. Fair enough. He isn't a fan of companies using terms like carbon neutral, clean or green when they're not founded on reasonable grounds. I think that's fair enough too. And he doesn't like the overstatement or inconsistent application of sustainability-related investment screens. Longo also warned companies against inaccurate labelling or vague terms in sustainability-related funds. We are hearing a lot more about greenwashing from ASIC recently, and given that so many companies talk up their green credentials and the hope that investors will invest with them, I think we're going to hear a lot more about it in the future.
Now, I mentioned this one, Sean, at the top of the show. Treasurer Jim Chalmers says the federal government hasn't ruled out taking further steps in response to what he called the appalling tax leak scandal engulfing PwC Australia.
Just keeps getting worse for the embattled professional services firm. We had Chalmers yesterday. We also had ASIC saying it's reviewing all its contracts with PwC Australia. Now, Joe Longo, the chair, who we were just talking about, said it's vital that PwC is held to account over the ongoing tax leaks scandal. He also suggested that the consultancy steps towards accountability so far, putting a bunch of partners on leave, isn't enough. Now, PwC has identified a list of 76 current or former partners associated with the tax leak scandal and given the names to a Senate committee. It includes 4 former partners involved in breaching confidentiality clauses while doing work for the federal government, 9 others who were placed on leave last week, and 63 current or former staff who received at least 1 email containing confidential information.
The boss of Elders, Mark Allison, has changed his mind and will stay at the agribusiness company, extending his 9-year stay, Sean.
Apparently, a global search firm couldn't find an adequate replacement. Now, Allison's new contract includes annual remuneration 37% higher than his current rate, retention payments if he stays around, and potentially a large bunch of free shares. Late last year, Elder's share price tumbled 23% on the day Allison announced he'll leave the business at the end of this year. Now he's done a U-turn. Elder's share price rose 5% yesterday. Mind you, it's still about half of what it was before Allison's initial announcement, thanks to a drop in profit margins on the back of lower cattle and sheep prices and a slowdown in its chemicals and fertiliser sales. Chair Ian Wilton, when asked why a board director stepped down ahead of the announcement about Allison staying, said what happens in the boardroom stays in the boardroom, which is a curious response.
Oh, very mysterious. I like that. And Sean, in one of the most incredible stories of the year, Kathleen Folbig has been pardoned and will be released from prison after spending 20 years behind bars for the deaths of her 4 children.
A truly incredible story. After a 7-week trial in 2003, a jury found Folbig guilty of killing her 4 babies, Caleb, Patrick, Sarah and Laura, between 1989 and 1999. New South Wales Attorney General Michael Daly yesterday said he'd recommended she be pardoned after an inquiry into her convictions heard credible evidence that the children might have died of natural causes. Thomas Bathurst, who led the inquiry into Folbig's convictions, said there's a reasonable possibility that 3 of the children died of natural causes, and he was unable to accept the proposition that Folbig was anything but a caring mother for her children. Folbig has always maintained her innocence. Rare genetic variants identified in Folbig and her daughters triggered a second inquiry into her conviction not long after a 2019 inquiry resulted in Folbig remaining in jail. Anyway, today she's a free woman and good luck to her.
In international news now, Sean, the US Navy has released a video of what it called an unsafe interaction in the Taiwan Strait, in which a Chinese warship crossed in front of a US destroyer in the sensitive waterway.
Have you seen the video?
I have. It's all a bit scary, actually.
It is. It's really scary because they're about 150 yards from each other, these vessels. Now, the US military said the USS Changhoon, a destroyer, and Canada's HSMC Montreal, a frigate, were conducting a routine transit of the strait over the weekend when the Chinese ship cut in front of the US vessel. As I said, it was about 150 yards away, according to a report on Reuters. In the video released by the US Navy, a Chinese warship can clearly be seen sailing across the path of the Changhoon in calm waters. Now, a voice can be heard in English, apparently sending a radio message to the Chinese ship, warning against attempts to limit freedom of navigation, though the exact wording is unclear because of wind noise. China has not commented directly on the US criticism of the encounter, but a couple of days ago, or over the weekend at least, they did rebuke the US and Canada for deliberately provoking risk with the rare joint sailing.
And finally, Sean, the world of flying is becoming more egalitarian, kind of, I suppose, with Qatar Airways set to scrap first class on long-haul flights.
Very significant. I mean, Qatar is regularly voted the best airline in the world. Its boss, Akbar Al-Baker, says the next generation long-haul aircraft will top out at business class because first class, or at least the investment in first class, doesn't justify the returns. Business class offers many of the same perks as first class, including double beds, Al-Baker says.
Hang on. Did you say double beds?
Yeah.
Really?
So you have seats next to each other and then they convert to a double bed.
Oh, that seems high risk.
You know what's interesting? In the actual Qatar photo of it, they have 2 women, 30-something-year-old women. One is lying down in bed. One is sitting in the bed, in the double bed.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you represent that without having someone like Michael Thompson saying, well, that's high risk?
Well, first of all, I want to know, do they know each other? Or are these just passengers who are just randomly assigned?
Oh, that would make it fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah, goodness me. Sorry, I interrupted you and I shouldn't have.
Yeah. Anyway, look, the point of this, Al-Baker says people don't buy first class when business is so good. According to a story on Bloomberg, it pretty much runs against the trend among global airlines. Germany's Lufthansa, Qantas and Air France are pushing their first-class offerings. Al-Baker also said Qatar wants to expand its operations in Australia, both via the airline and with its partner Virgin Australia. It wants to add extra daily services to Sydney, Perth, Melbourne and Brisbane.
All right. Up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview with Dr. Kim Horton, Chief Economist at the Regional Australia Institute.
All about mobility of labour, how Australians are moving from the cities to the regions and back to the cities in greater numbers than ever before.
Yeah, it's a really good chat. It's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Tuesday, the 6th of June, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and stay up to date on all the business news with Alexa and your Amazon Echo smart speaker. Simply say, Alexa, play the Fear and Greed podcast to catch the latest episode. You can get yours now at amazon.com.au. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.